You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and we're doing a special show today on my book on the Kennedy assassination, which is the title of the book is The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, and subtitled The Final Analysis. Now, this is a book I did with Dr. David Mantik. And David Mantik is a radiation oncologist. He studies X-rays for cancer patients. He's done it for over 4 decades. And he is really an expert in the Kennedy autopsy skull X-rays. There's 3 X-rays that are still in the archives, extant, of JFK's skull from the X-rays at the autopsy. And Dr. Mantik has taken in a densitometer, which is a scientific instrument that you can measure in minute measurements the light coming through an X-ray. By a beam of light is cast up into a little arm that measures how much light gets through. It's a logarithmic function. It tells you exactly what you're looking at in the X-ray. And if you can, Chris, if you'll just enlarge the title of the book so people can see more of the way the book, even larger than that, a little bit more, you can see that the book shows in the cover both the frame from the Zapruder film, where Jack Kennedy is hit 3 times. There's a yellow arrow in the back of his head. That's good right there. Yellow arrow in the back of the head, which one of the first headshots that pushed Jack Kennedy's head forward. It was a low angle from the Dal-Tex Building behind him, not the Texas School Book Depository. And then almost simultaneously, there were 2 shots to the front. The blue arrow was a shot that hit Jack Kennedy in the right temple, and you can see the bullet breaking up across the top of his head, but doesn't exit. And then the red arrow, a shot hit him on the templar bone right in front of the ear, the right ear, and it blew out the back of his head. That yellow arrow, you can see there's a black patch there, which blocks the head wound that Jack Kennedy suffered, which threw him violently back into the left. And so in the X-rays, you can see the blue arrow, you can see the breakup of the bullet across the top of the head. It was probably a lead zinc bullet, liquid, hard to remove in the pre-autopsy surgery that was done to mask the frontal shots. Then you can see a notch here, the red arrow, where it entered the bone right there by the ear and blew out the back of the head. And the yellow arrow where it hit at the knob of the back of the head and pushed the head forward. So those were 3 headshots, none of which came from the Texas School Book Depository where Oswald was supposed to be. In fact, if you look at the back of the head here, you can see a very bright white patch, which is a forgery. That's an altered photograph, which is trying to hide up the evidence of how much massive damage was done to the back of Jack Kennedy's head by the bullet that struck him from the right ear. So the shots came from the Dal-Tex Building. The red shot to the temple bone that blew out the back of his head was clearly Grassy Knoll. And the blue arrow could have come from Grassy Knoll further up or towards the railroad yard, or it could have come from the other side of the Grassy Knoll, of the railroad yard, and an elevated shot down on the car, because there were a couple of shots that looked like they came from there, one through the windshield that hit Jack Kennedy in the throat. So Jack Kennedy was hit in the back by shrapnel, piece of bullet that missed, then 3 headshots that hit, and 1 in the throat, which came in through the windshield. So there was clearly a crossfire shooting at Jack Kennedy. Now, the first point I want to make in the book is that, and this is scientific data. I can show you how the X-rays look in terms of looking at the measurements that Dr. Mantik made and how precise they were. It's a very convincing study. And my job in it was my second book on Jack Kennedy's assassination. My first one was written in the about 10 years ago, Who Really Killed Kennedy. And this book is much more of a analysis of the case itself, but not the medical evidence per se. whereas my most recent book with David Mantik is the medical evidence. Now, I want to read you what some of the doctors at Parkland Hospital said, and there's been a video out recently of the doctors at Parkland Hospital, and they all clearly saw the same thing, which was the doctors assumed that the bullet in the throat was a frontal wound. They assumed that the bullet that blew out the back of his head was an exit wound. They thought the shots came from the front. So Dr. Crenshaw, who was one of the doctors who was attending Kennedy at Parkland Hospital in the emergency room, said, "Then I noticed the entire right hemisphere of his brain was missing, beginning at the hairline and extending all the way behind his right ear. Pieces of skull that hadn't been blown away were hanging by blood-matted hair. Based on my experience with trauma to the head from gunshots, I knew that only a high-velocity bullet from a rifle could dissect a cranium that way. Part of his brain, the cerebellum, which is at the very back of his head and different color than the most of the brain, was dangling from the back of his head by a single strand of tissue, looking like a piece of dark gray blood-soaked sponge that would easily fit in the palm of a hand." So what Crenshaw says is blood was seeping from the wound onto the gurney, dripping into the kick bucket on the floor. Seeing that, I became even more pessimistic. I also identified a small opening about the diameter of a pencil at the midline of his throat to be an entry bullet hole. I had seen dozens of them in the emergency room. At that point, I knew he had been shot twice. Okay, once in the side of the head and once in the throat. So basically, when I'm going to continue with Crenshaw, because he gives really the most convincing testimony about what Kennedy's head looked like immediately after the shooting. He said, "I walked to the president's head to get a closer look. His entire right cerebral hemisphere, all of this part of the brain, was gone. It looked like a crater, an empty crater. All I could see there was mangled, bloody tissue. The damage I saw, there was no doubt in my mind that the bullet had entered his head from the front. It had surgically passed through his cranium. The missile obliterated part of the temporal and all the parietal and occipital bones. Parietal and occipital bones are in the back. The occipital bone is the very back, parietal bones at the top of the head, before it lacerated the cerebellum at the back of the head. The wound resembled a deep furrow in a freshly plowed field. Several years later, when I viewed slow motion films of the bullet striking the president, the physics of the head being thrown back provided final and complete confirmation of a frontal entry by a bullet to the cranium." Okay, so it was clear that when Kennedy arrived at Parkland Hospital, of course, the doctors did what they could. The bullet throat they opened it up and tried to do a tracheotomy to get him breathing again. But they knew, for instance, that it was pointless. And they eventually decided that there was no way they were going to save him. They knew he had been shot twice. They knew at least twice. And they knew that, in fact, the body was, the brain was gone. So Kennedy was dead when he got to the hospital. And the point was that they weren't going to save him. The number of doctors who saw the gunshot wound in the back of the head is enormous. We have a list of them in the book. And again, I don't think there's any doubt that they could not revive Kennedy. After a very short time, they just decided that they had to give it up, and there was no point in this. Dr. Crenshaw noted, "When I saw the severity of the head wound, I thought that everything we had done for him those 20 minutes was a complete waste of time. It was a 4+ injury which no one survives." And Dr. Clark said, "My God, the whole right side of his head is shot off. We've got nothing to work with." So again, even at the hospital, there was a scuffle because the Secret Service decided that they were going to take the body away from Dr. Earl Rose, who was the Dallas County medical examiner, backed by a justice of the peace. The murder was in Dallas, Texas. There was no federal crime to kill the president. And so therefore, they were going to do the autopsy in Dallas. It would have been done legitimately, but at gunpoint, the Secret Service took the body out of the Parkland emergency room after they got a casket from a local funeral home and put Jack Kennedy's body in the casket. They took it at gunpoint back to Parkland to fly it back to Washington, D.C. to do the autopsy. Okay, by the way, on the homepage, you can see we've got a QR code up in the upper left-hand corner. That will take you to the page on Amazon.com where you can see the book and buy the book. It's in hardcover. It's in paperback. Paperback edition is quite good and quite easy to use and to read. And so I recommend that you get the paperback version. It's less expensive, but it's quite good. It's 570 pages, very heavily illustrated. Now, Dr. Mantik, I think, was brilliant in being able to detect the forgeries on the skull X-rays, because they were. There's a lot of analysis in the book about how X-rays were doctored, could be doctored in the 60s, about how their photographic process. And the book is quite good on the forensics of the shooting. But I want to emphasize a couple of points. I want you to see a couple of points that are, I think, startling. One is the bullet at the top of the head that did not exit. Here's a picture from the book of this is a side view. This is Kennedy's lying. His head is lying on his left ear, and the X-ray is being taken through the right side of his head. And so the front of the X-ray up here by my cursor, that's his forehead, and the back, that's the back of his head. Now you can see where this little blue dotted line is. That's where a bullet entered the forehead, right there. And if you take a look at these little dots across the top of the head, that's the bullet breaking up. And you can see it does not exit the back of the head. But the biggest fragment travels the farthest because it's got the most weight, it's got the most momentum, it'll go the farthest. That's clearly a frontal shot that came in and went across the top of his head. Now, that was noticed by Dr. Crenshaw, who saw that and pointed it out earlier very clearly. I'll go to page 1A. We'll do that a little bit later, but Crenshaw said that he saw the bullet hit in the right hand, right by his forehead. And when the autopsy, post-autopsy surgery that was done before the autopsy was begun, and the book covers that in great detail. It's shocking. Kennedy's body was removed from the casket in the airplane at Love Field and put in the hold of the plane. So when they landed at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., they had all the ceremony when Lyndon Johnson gave a short speech, and they thought they brought Kennedy's body out from the front of the airplane. That was an empty casket. And it was driven to the Bethesda Hospital in a Navy hearse. But the body itself was taken when all the lights went off, and the ceremony that was televised of Lyndon Johnson giving a short speech, a helicopter picked up Kennedy's body and took it to Bethesda, and there was surgery on the head before the autopsy began in order to alter the evidence of frontal shots. Now, also in this figure 3.5, if you look down where my cursor is, you can see that there is a notch there by the right ear, and when a bullet enters the head at a angle like this, when it comes in in a tangential wound, it creates what they call a keyhole fracture. Okay, I'll show you that in a second here, but the keyhole fracture is a giveaway that the shot hit him in the side of the head there, coming from the Grassy Knoll, because the angle is right for the Grassy Knoll. Okay, and I can just find a couple of pictures here to show you in a little bit more detail how that shot came into the side. It's been a while since I've done all the illustrations on a podcast, so it takes me a minute or two to find the ones I'm looking for. Bear with me, but we'll get them here in a second. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so 4.1. Okay, so you can see here when the shot comes in, it creates like this pattern of a keyhole and fractures because it fractures the bone behind the entry point as it goes into the skull at an angle, kind of hitting it obliquely. And when we look at the X-ray itself, there you can see a close-up of the keyhole entrance wound and two different magnifications of the X-rays, two different clarifications of it. One of the X-rays in one of the House committees was done so it was perfected, made less fuzzy, and you can see how the keyhole fracture there indicates that the shot entered in the side of the head. Okay, there's an enormous amount of missing tissue on the right hand side of Kennedy's skull from what was blown out. The black area is all blown out tissue. And even if we look at Kennedy's shirt from when that he was wearing that day, I think you can see very clearly, here's Crenshaw pointing to the forehead where the one bullet came in, and you can see how the post-autopsy surgery made a mess of that spot. Kennedy's head did not look like this with all of the top of his head. They removed the parietal bone. You can even see the saw marks. So they went in there and looked for pieces of metal that they could remove to erase the trace of the bullets from the front to the back, which could have been seen otherwise at the autopsy. They wanted to alter the body before the autopsy so as to eliminate that evidence. And if I can just show you, here's Kennedy's bloody shirt, and you can see all the blood is over on the left. So you can see where the flaps of skin and bone are holding by a thread, as Crenshaw described, and that the yellow arrow, it's questionable where that yellow arrow really appeared, and the autopsy photographs are also altered. But you can see he bled out to the left, which indicates a shot from the right front. Okay, so now the evidence here of all of this, I want to go into showing you exactly the sequence of the shooting. When Kennedy was actually hit by the bullet from the front. And if we go in here to figure 4.11 and see the sequence of the shots, and there's an enormous amount of detailed information in this book. And if you are fascinated by it and really want to study it, I think you'll see convincingly that Kennedy was killed at a crossfire. There's no question about it. It was not Lee Harvey Oswald. No shots hit Kennedy's head at all from the angle of the Texas School Book Depository. And that's, I think, again, the fact that we've been lied to for so many years about the Kennedy assassination, over 60 years. And it's amazing to me that the lies have persisted. But again, the back of the book, we show a memo from the CIA saying anybody who questions the report of the Warren Commission that it was Lee Harvey Oswald who shot alone, the CIA is going to try to ruin. This is the Harper fragment. It was found to the left of the car. It was a piece of the back of Jack Kennedy's head that was blown out. And we place it within the skull. You can see where it fit in the skull, but it was a piece of blown out to the back. There's the Harper fragment to get another shot of it. And it was found the day after the assassination by someone who's walking in the area, a medical student who recognized what he had, and they identified it. The doctors identified it who had seen it as coming from the occipital range of the head, which is the very back. Okay, now I do the sequence of the shots so you can really get a good sense of how the shots occur with the physical evidence. Here at figure 411, so Jack Kennedy's already been hit in the back of the head. He's leaning forward, and this is where the shot hits him by the ear, and you can see his head explode. Now I'm going to increase the magnification of this here so that we can see it even better. I'm going to take it up to 500, which is but you can see there's Kennedy's head is just exploding. That's the shot at the side of the head that threw him violently back. Okay, and it's a massive wound. Okay, and then following that, Kennedy is thrown immediately back into the left. And you can see Jackie here he's violently back to the left. There's his head blown apart. And she's now panicking, trying to figure out what to do. She starts to get out of the car. Clint Hill is, if we lower the magnification, Clint Hill, hold on, is he's a Secret Service agent who's trying to get onto the back of the car. And you can see him here. He's just running up. As he gets here, the shot hit Jack Kennedy and threw him back, splatters Clint Hill with brain and blood material, as this officer here on the right is splattered with Kennedy's material. Clearly, the angle that comes from the Grassy Knoll. That's a Grassy Knoll shot. Okay, now when Jackie gets out of the car, she's panicking. She starts to come up out of her seat, and she's going to go on the back of the hood. She's reaching for a piece of Jack Kennedy's skull, which she grabs. You can see she's going to the left back of the car where Clint Hill is. And Clint Hill, basically, she's got it, and she's going to go back into the car. And Clint Hill makes sure she gets back into the car. Now, one of the more bizarre aspects of this is that by the time the car is going through the triple underpass again, what's happening is that you can see that it is Jack Kennedy. Jackie has Jack Kennedy sitting upright again. He's dead, but he's sitting upright. You can see this right as they're going underneath the railroad yard on the triple underpass. Let me get this to be zoomed up as well. Okay, there we go. And you can see this is Jack Kennedy's head right here. You can see his face, his ear. This whole blown out area is very clear in the back of his head. There's big black space. They couldn't alter that. Here's Nellie Connolly, who was sitting in front of him. By the way, Governor Connolly insisted he was hit by a separate shot, not by the same shot that killed Jack Kennedy. So this is just kind of reaction. Sometimes when people get injured, they think they can just put it back together again. Well, you can't do that. You can't just put the head back together again and Jack's all right. But Jackie tried it. Okay, so now, and we have testimony from Clint Hill, who over the years became convinced and started talking about the fact that Jack Kennedy was shot from the front. And so what he says is that he says in his book, Mrs. Kennedy and Me, he said, I'm almost there. Mrs. Kennedy is leaning towards the president. I'm almost there. I was almost there. Then I heard the shot, the third shot. The impact was like the sound of something hitting hard, something hard hitting something hollow, like the sound of a melon shattering onto cement. The same instant, blood, brain matter, and bone fragments exploded from the back of the president's head. The president's blood, parts of his skull, bits of his brain were splattered all over me, on my face, my clothes, and my hair. So Hill leaves little doubt, if any, that the shots that killed Kennedy, the shot that killed Kennedy, was from the right front. Okay, so at a book signing, Hill also gave a more complete statement of this was there's a YouTube video of him giving this book signing, which he says, as I approached the vehicle, JFK's limousine, there was a third shot. It hit the president in the head. the upper right rear of the right ear, causing a gaping hole in his head, which caused blood matter, brain, and bone fragments to spew forth out over the car over myself. At that point, Mrs. Kennedy came out of the back seat under the trunk of the car. She was trying to retrieve something that had gone off to the right rear. She did not know I was there. At that point, I grabbed Mrs. Kennedy, put her in the back seat. President fell onto her lap to his left. And Hill continued. The right side of his head was exposed. I could see his eyes were fixed. There was a hole in the right rear portion of his head about the size of my palm. Most of the gray matter in that area had been removed and was scattered throughout the entire car, including on Mrs. Kennedy. I turned and gave the follow-up car the thumbs down, indicating that we were in a very dire situation. The driver accelerated. He got up to the lead car, which was driven by Chief Curry, the Dallas chief of police. Okay, so it's very clear, I think, from the physical evidence that Kennedy was in a crossfire and he was shot from the front. And this is the book goes into great detail about all of this. And the pressure was put on the doctors to lie. By the way, I want to also show you for a moment how detailed Dr. Mantik's measurements were. Hold on here, just get another. That's the back of Kennedy's head blown apart. Harper fragment. It's where the Harper fragment fits in the back of the head. Some drawings from the autopsy. This one I want to show you is this is Dr. Mantik's work at the archives, and every one of these measurements is a separate measurement with a densitometer to show the amount of light coming through. That's how detailed Dr. Mantik's work was. And he was able then to discern the white patch and other alterations. He was able to discern the bullets across the top of the head breaking up, the keyhole fragment there that was for the shot that entered by the right ear. So there's very little doubt in the nature of what the evidence is that Kennedy was shot from the front. Now, the other part that I found interesting was the shot through the windshield, and that's here 5.5. You can see in the Alkins picture, Alkins was a photographer who took a picture from the front of the limousine just as Kennedy was being shot. This is the Zapruder film, and you can see the shot where the red circle is. That's where you can see the shot was puncturing the glass of the windshield, created a mark for the sun reflecting on it. And Kennedy has got his hands up to his throat. That's the bullet that went and hit him in his throat. Dr. Mantik thinks it might have actually been a shroud of glass, because when safety glass is hit by a bullet, it's the inside of the glass that shatters and is thrown back at you. Okay, and then the glare from the shot going through the windshield can be seen in several of the photographs. There's another, that's the Alchin's picture as the limousine was going away. This is Alchin's picture as the bullet was hitting Kennedy. Again, you can see where the bullet hole occurred, the red circle in the windshield. And that angle goes back up to the railroad yard at the other side. There's another picture of the bullet hole coming through the windshield. So that establishes shooters from the front. And the nature of the problem that the conspirators had was when the body reached Parkland Hospital, the doctors gave press conference and said Kennedy was shot from the front. But yet, because of the Alchin's picture taken from the front of the limousine, you see the Texas School Book Depository was behind Kennedy when the shooting started. So therefore, according to the Warren Commission, all the shots would have had to have come from behind. Any frontal shots would mean that the Warren Commission was wrong. And so they were locked into a body that had obvious evidence of frontal shots, and the picture from Altgens, which meant that Oswald then couldn't have been the killer, certainly couldn't have been the sole killer, sole assassin, because the limousine had already passed the Texas School Book Depository when the shooting started. Yet there was clearly a bullet hole in the front and all this other damage to Jack Kennedy's head, which indicates frontal shooting. And the hospital doctors at Parkland saw it as frontal shots. Okay, so what the doctors did, and what Kennedy's body was switched, and I do a lot showing how there were actually 3 caskets. It became like a circus, the chasing the caskets and trying to find out where Jack Kennedy's body was, and it was lost for a while because it was in the morgue with the autopsy doctors from Bethesda doing pre-autopsy surgery. In fact, on page 6.4 of figure 6.4, I show you the Kennedy in Bethesda just before the autopsy began. You can see the evidence of the pre-autopsy surgery. And here, let me get down to that. I do a lot of discussion about the windshield, how they covered up the windshield bullet hole, and that was covered up. The windshield of the limousine was on Saturday of the assassination was flown to Dearborn, Michigan, and it was changed out for a windshield that did not have a bullet hole in it. And Arlen Specter of then decided he would do the single bullet theory, which was that the bullet hit in the back of Jack Kennedy's, hit him in the back, and it went up through his throat, and then it turned and it went through Connolly's wrist, it broke a wrist, it broke one of his ribs, and ended in Connolly's thigh. And so, the damage done to that bullet was massive, yet the bullet was pristine. And Kennedy had the pre-autopsy surgery, which I'm finding here in a minute. And I assume, Chris, you can still continue to see my screen. But the casket, there were 3 separate casket entries. And the final one, they had Kennedy in the anteroom of the morgue. They did pre-autopsy surgery on his head. And if I can find here the autopsy picture in a second, you'll see how, there we go. You'll see how obvious it is that they did the surgery on the head. The head did not look in any of the doctors at Parkland's description like that. There was no damage to the top of the head whatsoever. The wound on his forehead was indiscernible. You couldn't see it. And yet, by the time Jack Kennedy goes from Dallas to Portland, go from Dallas Hospital back to Washington at Bethesda, all of his brains are out like this. Clearly, they removed the parietal bone and were searching in there to remove pieces of lead that would have been incriminating. Okay, and it's shocking to think that they did this and got away with it, but in fact, the truth is that they did. And when you think about how much we've been lied to, it's fairly pathetic to think that the government got away with killing a president and covering it up. Now, Chris, I'd like to have you have some comments on this, and I'm going to do a couple more things from my previous book, but the medical evidence, I think, is clear.
Oh, it's very clear. I mean, it's the cover-up has been obvious for a very long time. You've been through this before on the program, whereas we can get into this again. But it was the first big victory for the deep state, and the last big loss for the American people when it came to being able to hide what really happened to President Kennedy. But the forensic evidence, it really does not correspond with the official doctrine, if you will.
Not at all. Right.
Not at all.
No, I point out in my previous book that there have been 2 attempts to kill Jack Kennedy before Dallas. One was in Chicago, and they caught some people up in a hotel room above the parade route, or the motorcade route, from what would have been another high angle from a tall building. The word of Jack Kennedy was warned. I write in the book how the mob, who was close to Kennedy, got him elected president, warned him that he was going to be assassinated. He was going to be shot with a high-powered rifle from a tall building. And Kennedy shoved it off. He didn't take serious precautions. Then there was an attempt in Miami, which failed. Both of those, I think, were designed to test how well the government would react. And what would the conspirators found out was that they could control Dallas. They had excellent CIA contacts that penetrated into the police. They controlled the city. And Dallas was not favorable to John Kennedy in those years because it was very much opposed to any rapprochement with Russia. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, Jack Kennedy had been a hero, but also he was considered that by many in the conservative movement to have been a coward because he didn't actually go to war with Castro. But Castro and Khrushchev did remove the missiles from the Western Hemisphere, so Kennedy won standoff, but might have won the battle but lost the war, and that then ultimately the deep state killed him. And the book has a lot of good testimonial in it from the doctors, how they were pressured. The book is extremely, I think, convincing and very well footnoted. And the appendices are very detailed in terms of the technical material, but the book is solid. And we call it the final analysis because there's no question that, in fact, it proves definitively that Jack Kennedy was shot twice from the front, at least twice from the front, which means that the Warren Commission was lying. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and I think the importance of this story is to open our eyes to all the lies we've been told. 9/11, why did buildings that weren't hit by the airplanes come down that day? We go on. And the government lying is, I think, now more apparent than ever. And the political herding of the population to believe these extreme events occurred from lone gun shooter or Japanese had a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, when in fact the opposite was the truth. And FDR knew the Japanese were going to attack if we took their oil away from them, and he did it anyway, and they did attack anyway. So what we can conclude is that the scrutiny of the government that we're going through right now is imperative, is mandatory. We have to be doing it. And the Democrats, for lying all these years and controlling and working with the intelligence agencies to prevent the truth from coming out, have merely destroyed much of what's good about America, which changed the day JFK was killed. It's a tragedy that most of us have not yet fully recovered from. His loss was the loss of someone who was aiming for peace, and with his death came the Vietnam War. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. We've been reviewing my book, The Final Analysis, with David Mantik, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and it's been very well received. Robert Kennedy is like the book. His radiation specialist confirmed that Dr. Mantik was correct, that the x-rays had been seen 3 times and did have bullet holes, which were remarkably coincident with Kennedy's, with his wounds, which are not, according to the official story, wounds that should be there at all. So I'm going to bid you goodbye, and God bless. In the end, God always wins. God's going to win here too. And God does not create human life in order to lose. God creates this experience in order to win. And ultimately, Satan will be will be vanquished and sent back to hell where he belongs. It's Dr. Jerome Corsi. Join me in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's get on our knees and ask God to forgive us for letting you get society to this point. God will hear our prayer and heal our land. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll be doing podcasts continuing every weekday in this new format where we feel like we can get much closer to you and have a more intimate show. Thank you for joining us. God bless.